lie. He is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
Yeah, not just because the cops are doing the worship service down the hall. I mean, this is the Easter season, and the greeting for Easter is He is risen. I mean, for the whole time, not just for one shot. It is amazing how, of course, first of all, I gotta say, I was telling the class a little bit before we came online. For the last few weeks, it seemed like we had a different season every day. Now we have a different season every hour.
Yeah.
So we've already gone through 3 seasons so far since noon. So it'll be snowing by the time we get out. It's supposed to get down to 28.
Tonight?
No, in 3 days, after it gets up to 81.
Yeah, we're going to Denver, and they're hot right now, and they're cool now. So we're going to get there and bring Michigan with us. Of course.
Michigan is awesome. It really is. Class can be a little bit different. Months and months ago, back like October, in my head, in my fantasies, I thought, wow, it'd be really nice if we covered John, so when we get, Easter's late this year, we get like Easter, when we get to Easter, it'd be awesome. But as you know, we don't get real quick. But then I said, where we're at right now, because today we're going to go with Lazarus being called out of the tomb, that would be awesome. And on top, bigger than that, God is always awesome. If you're open your eyes, to listen to God, you see Him operating everywhere. So the class is going to start a little different today because we're going to go over this. I get the New York Times. I don't know how it magically appears. I've called up the New York Times and say, how come I get it? And they say, don't worry about it. So I don't. But it appears. And it is amazing sometimes what you run across. On Good Friday, they had this article interviewing Tim Keller as the main article on the op-ed page. It is mistitled, The Dying Pastor and Jesus' Return. It's got nothing about Jesus' return in it. It's got everything about the resurrection. So we're going to go over that article, and more, we're going to read something out of the book where the article comes from, actually. He wrote this book about a year ago. But we'll get to that after an opening prayer. You notice that the title for today's lesson is Resurrection, Hope, and Change in a Seemingly Unchanging World. And I'll wait till we get to the book, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we will get to where we're going to get to on this lesson today. Because the raising of Lazarus and the repercussions that come with it are certainly incredibly familiar to Christians, if not to a broader audience than Christians. Let's open with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you for this glorious world that you've given us. We thank you for, Lord, giving us life and life again. Lord, help us always to be a people that live with hope. Help us to be a people that are filled with joy, not just while we're in church or we're singing Easter hymns or we're celebrating or time's going right, but help us to see all things. In your name we pray, amen. Amen. And I give thanks that was not the cell phone with chimes from heaven.
I got it turned off.
Well, I said, wow, that was a good prayer. Now, last Friday, Good Friday, I was flipping through the New York Times, and I see this article about a dying pastor and Jesus' return. Again, we're going to read a little bit about it. I copied it because I thought there were some things in there that would be worth having. And it wasn't about Jesus' return, it was about the resurrection and the difference the resurrection makes. We've gone through one of Tim Keller's books, by far his best book, Reason for God, but he's written like 15, 20 books after that. 4 or 5 years ago, he had thyroid cancer, which he recovered from. And a year and a half ago or so, he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which has a very, very, very short expectancy. So I have seen pictures of him in the last month or so, and he's quite thin. And this is an interview that a religion writer for the New York Times said about him. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to read the 2 questions, because we're going to talk about the resurrection today. And we're going to talk about how the resurrection makes a difference in our life. And also, as Christians, sometimes we don't always grasp that. In your latest book, this Tish Harrison Warren is talking to him. Hope in Times of Fear. This is this book. The Resurrection and the Meaning of Easter. You wrote that our cultures experience a crisis of hope. Where do you find hope? What hope do you offer to others? And this is Timothy Keller answering. And remember, Timothy Keller is very sick. He's dying of pancreatic cancer. It could be any day. Certainly, it's not expected to be months away. The reason I copied this off for you is for you to read over and think about it, because it'll make your life better. You'll be a happier person. You'll be a person who lives with hope. The title of this lesson today, A Seemingly Unchanging World. We'll talk about that when I'm going to read a page out of this book. Maybe I'll read a page out of the book. I won't recommend anyone getting this book. If you're going to get it the hardcover. Can you imagine trying to read that? I mean, it makes this look like big print. If the resurrection of Jesus, this is Keller, if the resurrection of Jesus Christ really happened, then ultimately God is going to put everything right. Suffering is going to go away. Evil is going to go away. Death is going to go away. Aging is going to go away. Pancreatic cancer is going to go away. Now, if the resurrection of Jesus Christ did not happen, then I guess all bets are off. But if it actually happened, then there's all the hope in the world. That one paragraph, if you would memorize that paragraph. In fact, if I was considerably younger, I've taught about every kind of evangelism there is. I would just build an evangelism class on that, because everyone is in need of hope. All those things happen. And as a Christian, it ought to be foremost in your mind to tell anyone that all these things, Jesus is risen. All these things are going to go away. Now, we're going to go into the next part of that, because you'll be saying, well, I've already told people that. And so much of what we cover in Bible class answers the rest. So, if you believe in the resurrection, everything bad's going to go away. If you don't believe in the resurrection, there's nothing but hopelessness. Those are the only choices. In J.R. Tolkien's essay on fairy stories, he says there are indelible human longings that only fantasy, fairy tales, or science fiction can really speak to. He says that all human beings have a fascination with the idea of escaping time. By the way, I just read an article not even 2 hours ago. It was on Flip, that's that news service, that all these leading physicists and everything say there is no such thing as time. And as Christians, we agree with that. Genesis 1 says that. Where did time come from? God created it. People have tried to get rid of the 7-day week forever because it's a creation of God. They try to get rid of a 24-hour day. They can't. God, time is a creation. So, Where am I? Escaping time, escaping death, holding communion with other living things, being able to live long enough to achieve your artistic and creative dreams, being able to find a love that perfectly heals. Tolkien says, why do we have those longings? And as a Christian, he thinks the reason is that we were not originally created by God to die. We all deep down kind of know that this is the way life ought to be. And if the resurrection of Jesus Christ happens, then all those things are literally going to come true for us. So, what the resurrection says, a lot of times we say, well, the resurrection proves everything Jesus or God said is true, which is true, but it's physical, verifiable evidence that, as we're going to read here, because it's, the climatic words of, the Lord of the Ring trilogy, that one day everything bad will become undone. That's what the resurrection is. So, that's the reason you have this paradox. On the one hand, the resurrection is a kind of concrete thing to talk about, like what is the evidence for this historical event. Probably the single best book on this subject is a book by N.T. Wright. It's a big book. It's exciting reading for me. It wouldn't necessarily be exciting reading for a lot of other people. It's very technical. Yet if we come to the place where we accept it, then suddenly there's no limit to what kinds of things we can look forward to. So, if more than emotionally, intellectually, if you look at the facts, we went through Acts, we went through Luke, we go through every Bible, everything we're going through in John. It is overwhelming what's happened. No one is denying it. It makes people upset sometimes because it interferes with their view of things, but scientifically, intellectually, emotionally, accepting the reality of the resurrection, then you know all things are going to be okay. It's not just death has been defeated, and death has been defeated. Despair has been defeated. Cancer has been defeated. Your broken heart has been defeated. You might not know it quite then, but it has, and you see it. You can live with that hope. It's what people have done for 2,000 plus years. It's the only rational way to live. Everything else makes no sense. If you, I was thinking the other day, of course I've reached that stage where a lot of you have in your life, everyone in the generation ahead of you is, in heaven now. You pray they're in heaven now. All your aunts, your uncles, your parents, your grandparents, most of your older cousins, part of your brothers and sisters, everyone else. It's not like they never existed. Your life mattered. If there is no resurrection, none of that matters. What difference does anything make? But we know, even people who deny God, that's why I've told you so many times, there is no such thing as an atheist. There isn't. You don't exist that way. If you were a true atheist, you'd dig a hole in the ground, get in it, and bury yourself. Albert Camus said the very same thing, not about the hole in the ground. Albert Camus said that if you don't believe in God, I think it's The Rebel. He said the only logical choice is suicide, because there is no point to life. But people know, they know that, these doctors and nurses who for the last 2 years have just totally exhausted themselves. A life counts. You know, the people that work so hard for social justice, justice counts. I mean, the people who are outraged at what's going on, not just in the Ukraine, but in all the conflicts of the world, you know, they know that life counts. Otherwise, it's nothing. I know some of you readers are thinking, I can't believe there's a person with more than a third-grade education that actually believes that. But I do. And these last few months, as we have gotten in touch with these great parts of our faith, Kathy and I would both say, we've never been happier in our lives, even though I'm living under the shadow of cancer. And I've told you for all the years I've been teaching this Bible class, being old is great. These are the golden years. If you don't realize that the golden years is your perspective is pretty shoddy. You know, all you have to do is look around you from the time you're a little kid. You know people get old. You know all this stuff happens. But what happens is that you've witnessed so much. You can know so much. You have seen so much. You have heard Easter hymns so many times. You know the joy and the hope of life. So the older you get, the better it gets. I mean, that's reality. So I like a lot of old Star Trek, the old Star Trek, the ones that really look goofy nowadays. I mean, just like they got a color flashing light that's not even as cool as Christmas tree lights anymore. You know, that's the Star Trek. But when they go on these really advanced planets, almost all the time the people are old and they're happy. Second question here that this person asked. Can you reflect on how your suffering has changed, how you think about the suffering of Jesus and also Easter? The answer to that question, this is from Dr. Keller. Holy Week gives you both death and resurrection. They don't make any sense apart. Think about that. You know, you can't have joy without sorrow. That's another reason why Michigan is so much better than living in Hawaii. Well, no, I mean, I've lived in both of them. And I've, made conscious. You know, if the weather's the same every day, no one asks about the weather. You don't. Most of us, all of us, even those who are only in their 60s, we grew up in a different time. We grew up in a time where, like, if you got a cookie, that was a big deal. You know, I remember the church that I went to when I was a kid. On Christmas Eve, they would hand out a box that Concordia, they'd buy from Concordia, and it'd have a couple peanuts in, and a couple pieces of hard candy, and they'd also give you an orange. And that was considered a big treat. I think if you did that now, most kids would not, bring it from the front of the church. They wouldn't even just leave it somewhere. They wouldn't initially pick it up. You don't appreciate, as much. So you need both. So if you don't think so, we're very blessed. At least our house was blessed this winter. We never lost power. Nothing makes you. Our neighbor, by the way, lost power this week. Tree fell down, took off their power lines, which is so sad. It takes about 18 hours to get it back up. But if it's the middle of winter, you lose power. Aren't you so excited when it comes back on? I mean, just so excited, like the greatest thing in the world. Oh, the light's on in the refrigerator. How many times do you get excited about the light being on in the refrigerator in a normal week? Do you yell to your husband, look, the light's on the refrigerator? Yeah? You can't have one without the other. Where am I? You can't have the joy of the resurrection unless you've gone through death. And death without resurrection is just hopeless. Essentially, the death and resurrection motif or pattern is absolutely at the heart of what it means to live a Christian life. And actually, everything in life is like that. With any kind of suffering, if I respond to it by looking to God in faith, suffering drives me like a nail deeper into God's love, which is the cancer, is what cancer has done for me. I do think that the great thing about cancer is that Easter does mean a whole lot more, because I look at Easter and I say, because of this, I can face anything. In the past, I thought of Easter as a kind of optimistic, upbeat way of thinking about life. Now I see that Easter is a universal solvent. I can eat through any fear, any anger, and despair. I see it as more powerful than ever before. So that's what Dr. Keller wrote. Yeah, I bet he probably gave that interview within 2-3 weeks ago. But there's something interesting out of this book. This book, I won't say anything but good stuff about Timothy Keller, especially I don't know where he is in life or thereof. But there are things in all of his books. All of his books are not like Reason for God. They are like books that get churned out there. But they all have some nice stuff. Does anyone have anything to say about what I just read, by the way? You have it. I'm going to read this page. I might read this page. It is so small, I'll be blind for the rest of the day, if not for 2 days. But I'm going to try and read it. This says, I keep wondering what that sound is, but it's my finger in this mic. See? So don't touch the table. This was written in 2021, so it's about a year old. I want you, the timeline in this and something else that we'll read partway through it is just incredible, because things have gotten so much worse. This is from the introduction, and it's a page and a half long. Even before the COVID-19, it's called a new age of anxiety. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 and its aftermath, the Western world had been experiencing a growing crisis of hope. For at least 2 centuries, Western cultures had been animated by a powerful hope that history was progressive and that the human race was moving inevitably toward creating a world of greater and greater safety, prosperity, and freedom. In short, there was a strong belief that overall every generation of human beings would experience a better world than the previous generation. This is one of the legacies of the European Enlightenment, whose many figures predicted that human reason, ingenuity, and science, once freed from superstitions of the past, would inevitably bring in a better future. Remember, this book was printed, I don't know when in 2021, I imagine toward the end of 2021, so things have gotten so much worse since then. But then came the 20th century. In 1947, W.H. Auden wrote in his book-length poem, Age of Anxiety. The poem is about 4 persons in a bar in Manhattan talking about their lives and about life. It won the Pulitzer Prize, but it is seldom read. I started reading it once. It's a book-length poem. You've got to really have a period of concentration. You've got to be focused for at least part of a night. Once Christopher was born, that era was gone. Hasn't changed. He just keeps spawning other Christophers. His littlest one is different, and he has trouble reading. All sorts of people working with him, So he is into watching Japanese cartoons in Japanese. So he doesn't like to read the thing on the bottom, so he's learning Japanese. And he's knows a lot of Japanese. And I said, don't you think it'd be easier to learn to read better than to learn a different language? He said, no. So, that is, something else. But then came the 20th century. In 1947, I wrote that. What grabbed attention was its title, which seemed to capture the cultural moment. In less than 4 decades, the world had passed through 2 world wars, a pandemic, and the Great Depression, and at the time it was heading into decades of nuclear-armed Cold War between West and communist nation. Yet when the Cold War ended in 1989, the older belief in inevitable human progress seemed to revive. Some even declared the end of history, meaning that the lethal struggles between the great ideologies, fascism, communism, and Western-style democracy were finally over. The fears of warfare that could bring about worldwide conflagration were diminished. International capitalism, fueled by globalism, went into high gear, and many economies seemed to be thriving. The age of anxiety was over. The earlier optimism of the Enlightenment was rekindling. The number of people who said that children today will grow up to be better off than their parents' generation went up to over 50% of the population. One leading thinker who has provided an empirical basis for this optimism is Steven Pinker of Harvard University. His books, The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined, and Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science and Humanism, and Progress, assemble data to argue that across the world there is decreasing violence, warfare, and poverty, as well as lengthening lifespans and improving health care. You know, I read that sentence. I said, this guy must be a pure racist. I mean, from the bottom of his heart. Because he wrote this in 2017, 5 years ago. And I'm forgetting things at a quicker and quicker rate. But 5 years ago, there was a lot of poverty. There was a lot of violence. There was a huge immigration crisis in Europe and in this country. Just a massive amount of death and destruction. There was famine, there was plague, there was everything else. And this guy's saying, well, it's all going away. It is like being blind. Pinker confines himself to empirical measures of comfort and safety, yet a guy named Harari makes stronger claims in his 2017 bestseller, Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. He argues that in ancient times, human beings turned to God or to gods only because they did not have control over the world in which they lived. But we have control now. By the way, everything I'm reading here has massive impact on politics in Europe and in this country today. Huge, because there is that huge view that we can solve everything. As the dawn of the third millennium, this is that Harari writing. At the dawn of the third millennium, humanity wakes up to an amazing realization. Most people rarely think about it, but in the last few decades, we have managed to rein in famine, plague, and war. Well, that's Harvard. Of course, these problems have not been completely solved, but they have been transformed from incomprehensible and uncontrollable forces of nature into manageable challenges. We don't need to pray to any god or saint to rescue us from them. We know quite well what needs to be done in order to prevent famine, plague, and war, and we usually succeed in doing it. The title of the book, Homo Deus, conveys its basic conclusion. This is Keller writing again. It is not merely that we no longer need God, Humanity now is God. We are our own hope for the future, our own God. We can have not just hope, but confidence in a bright future because we have all the resources within ourselves to bring it about. You know, I read that. You know what I thought of? What other time, say in the Bible, did people say that? Babel. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. You know, you wish it would. I mean, one of the most defeating things about this whole thing in the Ukraine is nothing has changed. Nothing has changed from Babel. Nothing has changed from any of the ancient kingdoms of the world. But people, we can do it. We can do it. Combine that with, you know, the interview of Keller as he dies, the difference between hope and no hope. I mean, there is, with so many people who have a lot of power that, you know, we can solve. And I commend people that are working on energy problems, all of us, almost all of us. I can remember how terrible the 50s were. You know, you drive around the 50s and you had well, I don't know if you'd have a bag of stuff from McDonald's in the 50s, but in the 60s you would have. You know, you have trash in your car and you just throw it out the window. That's considered normal everywhere. You go down the highway anywhere and there should be trash everywhere. It's considered normal. There, you know, people who've worked on the Clean Air Act and so many things like that, you know, they make a difference. But there's a difference in making a difference and, you know, going to the extreme that we're going to defeat all these things. Because behind all of it, and we'll see, and I still plan, I think there's a lesson today. I mean, I really do. I mean, set it up that way. It's just things don't change. I mean, you can rationally, scientifically, intellectually see the fact of the resurrection and live in hope. Or you can deny it. You can live, I mean, when these two guys wrote their papers, I mean, these are Harvard guys, supposed to be so smart. You know, and they probably are. They're probably wonderful guys, work hard. I don't know anything about them. But I'm sure they worked hard. They're at the top of their field. You know, to say that, well, we've really eradicated this, is just like not looking. You know, it's like getting up in the middle of the night and having your eyes closed and say, nothing out there. And it's exactly it. Because I can think of no time in my life where there hasn't been war. Just we don't see it. There are wars today. You know, everything is flared up again in Israel. There is riots in Iran. There is a hot war starting between Afghanistan and Pakistan. I mean, all sorts of people have died. All sorts of soldiers have died. You know, you can just go around the world, place after place. And I tell my wife I don't like to go to the grocery store anymore. It's just not fun. You know, I mean, the price of food isn't going up a few cents. It's going up by bucks on a lot of things. And I think all the people who, the worse off you are, the worse off you are. I mean, it's just, you know, there are going to be food shortages in this country. Ukraine, which is like one of the biggest exporters of food in the world, like 25% of the world's grain, more than a third of their crop won't get planted this year. It's supposed to be famine time throughout the world. So to say that man, we got everything solved. I don't think we do. So. The next thing on the paper there is change in an unchanging world. The world doesn't change. People get sick. People die. There's economic chaos. I mean, most of us have been so blessed, but it can happen so quick the other way. There is war. There is who in their right mind in this country would have thought 30 months ago that we would go through a pandemic? Who would have thought schools would have been shut for nearly 2 years? Ethan the other day, and Max, East Lansing on Monday said you don't have to wear a mask anymore. And now no one knows what to do. You know, Ethan says, well, you know, I feel better with a mask on. He's had a mask on for 2 years. It's just, you don't know what to do. Who would have imagined? A lot of great people did a lot of great things, but to be honest with you, I tried going back. I have a bunch of history books that have, you know, pandemics in them. Was it in this book? Is in one of Keller's books. Martin Luther, in his day, the bubonic plague was raging across Europe, and he wrote a letter on what to do. And as Lutherans, we should have read that letter a long time ago, because it was just like really sage advice. The fall of the Roman Empire, probably the number one cause of the fall of the Roman Empire, was a 3-year pandemic. Pandemics have a tendency to run about 3 years. You read that book, right? Who was the guy? Tom Holland's book.
The Shadow,
Yeah,
the Sword and the...
yeah, that book though. But he makes the argument that Rome ran out of people because of a pandemic. And so there was no one left, you know, to combat, you know.
And the city that survived closed its gates to everybody.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, you think things change, and they don't. But the other thing that Keller wrote in that letter, or that Tolkien wrote, you know, the quote, that people have this thing, you know, life counts, but there's this greater yearning. So people work hard to survive. There's something. So, and this is the thing, by the way. This is the only thing of any other thought system, of any other political system, of any other theological system. There is only one that gives hope, and that's in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And your certain hope that you share in that resurrection. What is your objective, not subjective, but what is your objective reason to hope I too will see the resurrection? Your baptism. In your baptism, you share in the death and burial of Christ so that you can be certain you will also share in the resurrection. I've been baptized. I know I'll be raised with Christ. And certainly not because, you know, I'm any kind of perfect. 2 days ago, that wonderful corgi we've got was let loose and it made a mess, and I told Ethan, it's your fault, Ethan. It wasn't his fault. So it was his dad's fault, which is just like an old Ethan. And so I apologized to Ethan, this morning, I said, Ethan, I was wrong and you were right. And now I'm going to have to hear that the rest of my life. I've heard it in school. He was so happy. So, we're imperfect people. How we can be certain we're going to defeat cancer. How we can be certain that death does not hold any mastery over us. How can we be certain we will see those we love again? How we can be certain that any injustice, and injustice will happen in your life, that occurs will be made right, is because I'm going to share in the resurrection. And I'm going to share in the power of the resurrection today. That's called hope. I mean, that's what Paul pleads, that he's so happy that he can share in the power of the resurrection. But I will share in the resurrection, not only in heaven, but we all believe in the resurrection on the last day. That's what we confess every week. I'm going to read John 11:21 to 37. I keep pushing it. I'm going to not run out of time. Dreaming. This is started where we were. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, but even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, there's something wrong here. Was that it? Martha said to him, I don't know. My electronic Bible seems to be messed up. That's okay, I'll use my phone. Well, that gets so hard. I saw that earlier and it didn't make sense. Oh, I know what happened. He'll rise again. I know he'll rise again the resurrection of the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he dies, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. You've heard that statement, and you've, I hope, felt good about the statement your whole life. But really feel what he is saying here. Jesus is that resurrection. Jesus is that hope. And he'll never die. Life isn't without hope. Do you believe this? She said, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. When she said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Everyone's favorite Bible verse. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? I've got changed, an unchanging world for all this. Jesus is that change, that real change. He said that everyone's favorite Bible verse is Jesus wept. It should be because Jesus wept. It means even though Jesus knows each one of you will be in heaven. You've won. You've won. There is nothing in this life that can be better than you have won. I think one of the funniest things, and I can't think of this funny, people who get this huge sum of money. I know this guy who won $800,000, and he was a very old man, and he died like within 6 weeks. He knew he was. It's sort of like, what is that worth anything? Or all these people who've got all these billions of dollars, why people suffer. You know, none of that counts. What counts is that God loves you. I mean, God sees everything that you've gone through in your life, everything that you might be going through, and he cares. Jesus wept because even though he knows you're going to be in heaven, you know, it hurts. We understand the hurt. You don't want someone you know that you love to hurt, even though you know, it's going to be okay. It's just that. And so God knows, God cares. And then I put, in caps, God acts. God is just not an intellectual thing. God is an acting thing. And he acts in all of our lives every day. That's why, I do think it's important that you, every day, count your blessings. See the things. I mean, there is so much. I mean, the devil, the world, and our own broken selves want to, and not wrongly, see all the things that are wrong in our lives, all the hurts, all the injustices, all the pain, but also those blessings there. And you can always see that better day. Then Jesus, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." We talked about this 4 days last week. 4 days was, the time, not just, there's this thing that after 3 days there's a spirit hovering over it. It goes. I'm not unsure, or I think a lot of people have experienced something like that, that they have come to a near-death experience, and they talk all the time about them able to look upon themselves. Who knows? But after 4 days also, in that climate, in that place, the body starts to decay. The features of the face are, starting to rot. The body's starting to bloat, if not, pop. So it's gross. Talking about an extremely gross time. That's what they're concerned about when they open that cave. 3-4 years ago, I think I told you we had a dead deer in a tree in our backyard. That was when that mountain lion was around. And the mountain, it was just off our property. So it was on Burcham's property, but no one was going to get it. It was summertime. Yeah, stay out of that area. It wasn't funny, Mary.
You think my neighbor had a groundhog that died and he couldn't get under his porch.
Oh, it's terrible.
It was all. Big.
Fortunately, when mice die in your walls, they don't really smell. Cats do, though. Cats can get caught in a wall. Let's see. Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said these things, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Untie him and let him go." There's so much I could say about this that I'm not going to say right now. But this is incredible. This is a proleptic eschatology. What's going to happen to all of us happened in a small event. It'll happen in a universal event. The resurrection is the real. It changes everything. It gives hope to everything. It gives healing to everything. It cures everything. You find yourself being angry, and there's a lot of things to be angry about. Every day you can get up and you can be angry. You can be angry. You can go to the grocery store and be angry. You know, you can go, your kids don't do something they're supposed to do. You can be angry. You don't do something you were supposed to do. You can be angry. You can be mad at the government. You can be mad at anything. You know, I haven't paid for gas with money, and I can't remember when. You know, I mean, it's got to be 20 years. I mean, I cannot even remotely remember when I actually used money to pay for gas. And when you use that credit card to pay for it, you don't see it. But if you were up to a pump and you had to get 50, 60 bucks out of your wallet and take it into the store, it'd be like, my son is so dumb. He bought 2 cars that both run on premium gas. And he could have got those same cars that didn't run on premium gas. It had nothing to do with anything. My car doesn't run on premium gas. I mean, you got to use premium gas sometimes. But you realize you probably got a car that runs on premium gas. It's fun to get up to a pump and see. Yeah, I couldn't imagine it's not. So my car, you're supposed to put premium in if you're in the mountains and hilly terrain. I don't consider Park Lake a mountain. And then this is one of the transition statements. How could you not believe, I have written there. How could you not believe? It's 45 and 46. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. I have not read a commentary that everyone that saw it believed. And this is a triggering event. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. I mean, the ones that went to the Pharisees aren't people who didn't believe. They're people that believed, just like we've seen in other miracles. They say, hey, look what Jesus is doing now. He raised a man, he gave sight to a person who had never seen before. He made that guy walk. Remember how mad you got at that? He made that guy walk who hadn't walked in so many years. And now he's raising people who have been dead for 4 days. I mean, how can you not believe? It's no different than the two, dudes from Harvard. Say, the world's getting better. We've got control of everything. People are getting along. There's no war. We got this food thing down. Boy, we can really get rid of this disease and plagues and all that kind of stuff. Let's build a tower all the way up to God. I mean, nothing changes. Every generation, we think the same thing. But also that thing you got that was in the New York Times from Keller, there's something in people. That life is worthwhile. There's something in people that say there's more than just death. Wow. Have you seen a picture of Jeff Bezos lately? You ought to look him up online. He's must have 100 doctors following him around. He's like this big old muscle man now. This is like an old, business guy 20 years ago. He's all buff. You know, I hope you're not too excited, John. Oh, he's got all these injections and everything, and he wants to be the first guy who doesn't die. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. I've got this next thing here, a seemingly unchanging world. I'm going to read 47 to 53. And this is sad. I mean, it's today's world. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we going to do? For this man performs many signs." They're not denying it, by the way. They're not saying, well, he didn't really raise the guy from the dead. It's obvious that he did. They're not saying that he didn't give sight to that person who had never seen in their life. He did. You know, we don't even know all the things that Jesus did. They're not denying it, not one bit. But they say, if we let him go around like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. I mean, in these 6 short verses, what's going on? The concern is not for anything except their position. They're no different than that dictator that's in Belarus. You know, it's like, man, if anything changes, it's not about the people, it's not about the nation. It's about greed and self-interest and hate. I mean, nothing ever changes. It's not about even denying the truth. You know, you look at this and you look at what's going on, you know, in Russia today, in Ukraine today. You look at what's going on in so many European capitals, and even about like so many people in this country. Well, maybe we should just, you know, give Putin what he wants. I mean, that's what they said, you know, in 2014 when he took Ukraine. That's what they said in what, 1937, 38? You know, when Hitler took the Sudetenland. Just, everything's all settled now. Nothing ever changes. There is hope, or there's a lack of hope. There is belief in the resurrection, or there is hate and greed and self-interest. And it has nothing to do with facts. It has nothing to do with being rational. You look at this. These high priests are totally irrational. It makes no sense, no logical sense what they're doing. Next thing here, what do you think? Now the Passover of Jesus was at hand. Many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus, saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so that they might arrest him. You know, it always comes down to, what do you think? No one else can make a decision for you. It is you and you alone. Believe it or not, I'm going to read these 11 things out of 12 because it leaves us in a better place. And it also fits then next week will be at Palm Sunday. 6 days before the Passover. So now we really know where we're at, and that's how many days, 7 days are left in the rest of the Gospel of John, which is the other half of it. Jesus therefore came into Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at the table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" By the way, 300 denarii is not that much money, He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me." When the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, they came not only on account of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus. Mary understood. Mary understood in a way that no one else was understanding, that Jesus was about to die. This was anointing him for his death. So I put here, just because it came in my head, a change is going to come. That's a famous line from a famous song by Sam Cooke. And it's about civil rights, but this is about civil rights here. But I find an interesting thing because got the good old internet now. You press a button and learn anything. So I want to see whether about that song. So I saw an article about Sam Cooke, and I knew that Sam Cooke was murdered, shot, and there's a very salacious story how he was running around with no clothes on, and the hotel manager shot him. But there's another story that says that's not what happened at all, that the LA police were out to get him because he was a civil rights leader in LA, and he had gone to all these meetings. But it mentioned that he was shot in the lobby of the Hacienda Hotel. And I said, I've lived in the Hacienda Hotel. In fact, when Hughes brought me from Hawaii to California, a Hacienda Hotel, which is right by LAX, is where they put you up. In fact, they made me rich. They made me much better well off. It was a fairly nice hotel back then. And they paid, a suite for me and my family to stay while they looked for a house for us and all that. But they paid for everything. Paid for all our meals, paid for a hotel, paid for anything. But at the same time, they gave us per diem. So I was there for just over 6 weeks, and they were getting like $160 a day per diem. This is back in, I think, 80, 79 or 80, yeah. And so I went to the disperser when I finally got an apartment, and it was like $6,000 or $7,000 per diem. And the girl said, "We can't give you $7,000. We paid for all your bills." I said, "That was the deal." And they gave it to me. I said, "This is going to be a good company to work for." But the company didn't pay for that. You know who paid for that? You did. I was on a federal contract. Money means nothing. So, but change is going to come. And that's going to happen in the next verses. Jesus is going to come in. It's the beginning of Palm Sunday, but the week of Passion. And within a few days, he's going to die on the cross. But the same thing, with the Judas. Same old self-interest, same old greed with the high priest. They're going to murder this guy. They're going to murder this guy because, He's just interfering with them. You know, I look at this, I look at Ukraine, I look at so many things so many times, and without the resurrection, it's all for naught. But Jesus is risen from the dead. You are confident. You should be confident. I want you to be confident. Anyone listening out there, be confident that sure as you shared in the death and burial of Christ through the waters of your baptism, God has promised you will share in the resurrection. Old age, arthritis will go away. Anger will go away. All the rotten things people have said to you your whole life, they're going to go away. Any disease you have is going to go away. Any injustice in this world is going to go away. All things will be made right. You know, the very ending lines from Lord of the Rings. You know, Tolkien has that one character, I don't know who they all are, you know, say, does it mean that everything, you know, is going to go back? That all the bad things, you know, are going to be reversed? And they are. That's what it means to be a Christian. We confess every week in one form or the other. I believe in the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting. Amen. Hold on to that every day. Every day. You know, that's why it's important to pray. You know, important to go over these 6 chief parts. You know what you believe. Can't believe we got all through that. But praise be to God. It's summer out. Going to be in the 80s. You can go to the beach, you know, on Saturday. We're going to be so hot on Saturday. If it gets 80 around here, it's going to be so stuffy. We're going to be, you know. And most of you are going to be wearing your sweatshirts, and you're going to go to Myers on Saturday morning, and I can't breathe. It won't take that long. Heavenly Father, every day is a glorious day. Help us to live with hope and joy. Help us to know all those bad things are going to change. We are your children. You love us. You care for us. You've made us yours. Help us to go out and make a difference in this world. And help us always to live in your joy, your peace. Amen. Bless you all.